Right.
Welcome to my second Substack Live, this time with Anne Byrn. Anne, how are you?
Doing great. Chris, how about you?
Great. I just want to say before we get started that this book, Baking the American South, I hope everybody can see it. You can see how many little notes I have here. This is like one of my all-time favorite books. It's the recipes, I know a fair amount about baking. I did a dessert book years ago. There was a ton of recipes in here I knew nothing about. The stories about where they came from or the origins of the recipe were really fascinating. And it's not that often you come across a book where it's kind of familiar territory, but then you find out how little you know about that territory. So I just we'll talk about a bunch of recipes there. But anyway, now one of my other favorite books was your Cake Mix Doctor, because I knew Peter Workman in the day, and Workman just did amazing books. And this was, I don't know, the whole design of it and the concept of it was fun. It was interesting. It was colorful. I just thought it really took cookbook publishing in a different direction. So, did you have as much fun doing it as I had reading it?
I did. It was a really crazy busy time in my life. I had 3 young children and was a part-time newspaper reporter when I pitched that idea to my agent, who then pitched it to Peter Workman. So I had very little time to get it done, and that was not fun. That was stressful, but yeah, I mean, I think I wrote it in a very fun vein that, you don't have to be serious about cake baking. This is something completely new, and it fit my lifestyle. Let's just say that. Yeah. And Workman embraced it. And gosh, I mean, it
I think
sold,
you sold a few copies, didn't you?
sold a few copies. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody knew that all the photography was shot in an intern's apartment in New York.
Really? Because one
Yes.
of the things about it that was so great was it that back cover that had all the photos and yeah,
Yeah, Peter Workman called that the postage stamp
right.
approach to photography, and I think that that was its charm. It was not perfect, and I mean, through the years when the book became successful, I would ask for a reshoot of the photography, but everybody said, "No, we don't wanna change it."
It's interesting you mentioned that. There's a guy called Tony Northrup who's reviews cameras. He's been around 30 years, professional photographer.
Mhm.
And he just released this video on YouTube and said, in fact, everything he's taught people over 30 years is pretty much wrong. And any photograph that looks like it could be AI generated is now worthless. And
Wow.
people
Yeah.
want real photos. They want imperfect photos. They want it to look authentic. So I guess Peter
Wow.
Workman kind of knew what he was talking about, but I think
He
he's
was a visionary, yeah.
ahead of his not ahead of his century, actually, come to think of it, because it was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
um, so you worked at the Atlanta Constitution for years.
Yeah.
So those days are over. I mean, I know
Mm.
that the Wall Street Journal just let go a lot of people in the food. The Washington Post did that a month ago. I guess the New York Times cooking has a huge department, but
Definitely.
they have that subscription thing which does well. So, what was that like? And do you reminisce or think about those days as being something that's sort of lost in the wind a little bit?
I didn't realize how hard I worked. I think I'd forgotten those days of reporting on a food story. I had to have 5 sources to turn it into an
Really?
editor. Yeah, there
Huh.
was a high standard, a high bar. You could not write in first person unless you had a corner office, and I didn't have a corner office. I started out making $17,000 a year. So you had to love newspaper journalism back then, and I did. I got bit by that bug, and but what you got was a life. And I think that Atlanta was growing, and I was sort of in on all those conversations. And Natalie Dupree,
Oh,
who
yeah, Natalie.
became a mentor of mine, she had these, dinner parties at her apartment in Ansley Park in Atlanta that were like salons. And there would be the mayor, and there would be Julian Bond, and there would be
Hmm.
all of these people you had read about in the newspaper were there sitting there at dinner. I mean, it was something I could not. It was irreplaceable to me. So, yes, those were different times. And I'm really glad that I had the experience.
I love that you said you had to have 5 sources, which
Yeah.
would not occur today. Well, it's
No.
almost like one thing that's always bothered me is people talk about food writing as if food writing is its own kind of thing. And I've
Mhm.
always said there's no such thing as food writing or sports writing or anything else. It's just writing. And either you're a good researcher and reporter or writer
Mhm.
or you're not. But it seems like also a lot of food writing became um, not repertorial, but kind of you know talking about the physical joys of cooking and eating food and dining out, and it became more like a rah rah you know kind of a thing rather than real reporting. And,
Yeah.
and and that kind of food writing I never liked. Like the
I didn't
basil scented
yeah.
this and the you know I don't we don't need that. But the real reporting, which was great. I guess a little bit that's left in restaurant reviews, I guess, to some extent.
It's
Um,
written it's left maybe in magazine pieces.
yeah,
I think whenever, some of my favorite articles were when I had to travel and I had to interview someone, and I had to use interviewing skills, and I also had to prepare for the interview.
right.
So I think the preparation that went into, new food journalism, but I see it's there's just so many different types of it. I actually was talking on the phone with a young woman yesterday who's in her young early 20s, lovely person. She's getting some culinary experience. And she, kind of looks at what I do and says, I kind of want to, I'm interested in sort of doing what you do one day. And I told her, get out there and get some experience and have some fun. I mean, your 20s are your time to make some memories, get out of this country, go someplace else and pick grapes or make cheese or something, so that you have something to write about when you get to be my age.
You sound just like Julia Child when you said that, by the
Oh,
way.
that's a
It's exactly what she would say. Like, get
really?
out, go to France, learn how to cook,
It's
travel,
true.
have fun, drink some wine, eat some cheese.
Yeah,
Stop sitting in your apartment and brooding about what you want to be. Just go do it, right?
just do it.
Well, I think one of the changes I think that's happened that I'm in favor of is I think at one time people went to other cultures and sort of put it on a pedestal. A pedestal, it's like, oh, it's everything in Morocco is terrific, all the food's great, and we have to kind of worship it, as opposed to go to Morocco and you're a cook, they're a cook, and you have a conversation, and you don't you're not you're not worshiping their food. You're just interested in their food.
Right. Well, you're connecting with
You're
them.
connecting with somebody and it's on an
Yes.
equal level. It's like
Right.
you know things they don't know, they know things you don't know. Have a conversation.
Right.
Some of the food in Morocco is great, some of it's not great, a lot of it's good. Like any
Right.
place in the world. You can go to Fez and have a bad meal, and you can have a great meal. But I think that sort of the equality, everyone's sort of the same plane is really, I think, is really the right way to think about food, right? Because
Yes.
we're all when you get in the kitchen, we're all kind of the same. We know different things, but
Correct.
we're still trying to do the same thing, which
We're
is
we're
cook.
hungry, we're
Yeah,
hungry, we have to pay for ingredients,
right,
we have to get a meal out and feed other people, we have
right.
similarities. I
And you
think that yeah, food has always connected us, yeah.
and you got kids who hate what you cook.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, we all have. I, people always ask me, "Well, God, your kids must really eat." Well, I said, "Not really. They don't. Most of what I cook, they don't want to eat." So anyway, um, let's talk about those little community cookbooks and PTA books and stuff.
Mhm.
You talk about how you love those because they teach you a lot about the culture and what people are really cooking. So I got a bunch of them as well. Why do you like them?
They're a snapshot into that community, and if they're done well and really embraced by the community, and the committee doesn't try to make it same old, you learn what ingredients they use over and over.
Mm,
You might get a head note. You might get little introduction that would
right.
be a teaser on, why they use this ingredient, or whose grandfather came in and settled in that valley. I look at those as just hoping that in there's something I didn't know, and it's just this most refreshing, humbling, down to earth look at what real people ate in a micro
Mm.
dot of America. Yeah.
Yeah, one book that reminds me of that. excuse me, is James Beard's American Cookery.
Yes,
'Cause, he in those head notes told the stories about Mrs. So and so she crab soup, and
definitely.
and I love the way he wrote about it. He'd say, "Now this is, this may not be the best version, comma," you know, and what he was saying was, "I don't really like this recipe that much, but it's an interesting story."
Yeah.
So, it was very, anthropological in the way he did that because he liked the surround of the recipe, he liked the people,
Mhm.
and that came out really nicely. So I don't,
Yeah.
I think that's true. I think and that's why the Baking American South, you do exactly that. You provide the context. And, people always ask, like, "Where did spoon bread come from?" or whatever.
Mhm.
"Where did the coconut cake idea come from?" And very often, you show a picture of the person, right? Or you at least explain how it came
Mhm.
about. And,
Well,
um, in American cooking, there's like other cultures, there are all these intersections of different cultures and people and places, and it's kind of interesting to see how it all goes together.
it's fascinating, really. And, the best food has come out of the homes and it's fed people. And so it was important in this book for me to have pictures of just everyday people, people we've never heard of before, and to mix that in with historical photos of a president or a president's cook. I like the sort of patchwork quilt um, way. So it's not so maybe when you turn the pages, you're surprised what you might find.
I have a note from someone saying, if you can't, uh, access the chat, refresh your window and then put the questions in the chat section. So I'm not sure I understand what I just said, but anyway, I
Well,
just said
I this is so great doing this, Chris, because, I haven't done a Substack live, so this
well,
is
I
fun for me.
I just launched it a few weeks ago, and I love it because it has its own ecosystem, its own community,
Yeah.
and you can do the chats, and you can, it's sort of a little like Twitter and everything else, YouTube, all together. It's great. Um, so there was a coffee cake recipe you mentioned,
Mhm.
and we actually did a chocolate potato cake here, which
Yum.
was incredibly delicious. So you say potato cooking water is found in many German cake and bread recipes.
Mhm. Very much
I
so, they
did
don't wanna throw it out. Yeah. Why would you wanna throw out something that was valuable? So they must have known, or maybe they had to go to a well to fetch more water, right? So, why not use the water that you've already got that's left over from cooking the potatoes? It makes a lot of sense, and they may have put that into the bread recipe and realized that it made a nicer bread. It pulled everything
hmm.
together. Was there something in the potatoes that and there was, the starchiness in the potatoes definitely, you know, um enriched the bread. Yeah.
That reminds me of the Fanny Farmer cookbook when I did that dinner years ago based on Fanny Farmer. And she would say they would use everything in stock, right?
Mhm.
They had a back burner. Actually, I had a coal stove and there were 4 burners, 2 in the back, 2 in the front. So the back burner was the lower heat burner because it wasn't right above the firebox.
Right.
And they would even use water in which they cook cabbage.
Oh,
I mean
wow.
that's pretty extreme.
Yeah.
So, right, they would nothing got thrown out.
Nothing.
The other thing about those old books, the one thing that really I still can't get my head around is whisking egg whites, right? So
Mhm.
they didn't have a whisk, they'd have, like, small branches sort of bound together, right? And they would talk about whisking for half an hour. Yeah, like 12 egg whites, and I'm going like, those people, and mostly women, I guess, must have been extremely strong. Like, their arms must have been, Mike Tyson level,
Yes, and they were, and if you look at those types of cakes, they were really baked in the summertime or in warm weather
Mm,
when the hens were laying eggs, before, egg
right,
cultivation got so sophisticated. And most of those women were Black,
yeah,
and they were working in, white kitchens because those were cakes, those angel food cakes, etcetera, sponge cakes that relied on the
right.
aeration from the eggs. I mean, that was a privileged cake. That was not the strawberry shortcake that I grew up on in Tennessee was a biscuit. It didn't require any eggs.
Yeah, you get
Yeah.
a Martha White hot rise flour mix, cornmeal mix, which, by the way, I just ordered yesterday. I interviewed someone about that on the radio show recently, and I was just fascinated. So I ordered a bag of Martha White hot rise all purpose flour and corn flour, cornmeal. So I'm
Wow.
gonna
So that's
make well, I'm gonna
what are you
make
making with it?
well, I thought I would just try corn muffins or cornbread. I mean, I
Yeah.
make it from scratch, but I just wanted to see what it was like. You know, she said something that and I didn't know, which was in the South, people bake biscuits or cornmeal every day. It
Mm,
wasn't like you did it
yeah.
once a week. You just do it virtually every day. And a family might go through, she said, 25 pounds of flour a week or some just
Wow. Oh, it's
outrageous.
a big family, or they were
Well,
also feeding people on a farm.
I guess so, but
Yeah. Yeah.
more than a pound or 2 of flour is a lot.
Wow, that's a lot,
So
yeah. Well, if you're doing 3 times a day and you say every recipe for the biscuits takes 2 cups of flour, that's
yeah,
6 cups of flour for the day, so that is, about a pound and a half, and then you times 7, you're looking at about 10 pounds of flour a
there you go.
week for biscuits right there. Yeah,
So
it's
I never understood self-rising flour because all you're doing is adding some salt and baking powder or whatever.
yeah, it
But
is very
if you're
hard.
doing it 3 times a day, maybe
That's a
even
lot.
that's probably useful, right?
Right, it is, and if you get used to doing one recipe and you don't use a recipe, that's the flour you're gonna use, and it's fast. Martha White got really popular in the 1930s and the 40s here in the South because people had to work, and they had jobs outside the home, or they had a farm with a lot of employees to feed, and so everything had to be fast, and that's where self-rising flour came in. But I think it's interesting you talk about Martha White cornmeal because, it makes a really lovely cornbread, but it's gonna be cakier.
Mhm,
Um, I don't think it's been milled more
right.
finely and processed, so it doesn't have those little rough edges. So if you like corn muffins that have a lot of texture, that have, like, a crust on the outside and, it may be a little too soft. So but it'll be fun
Well,
for you to see
it's
the
like I went to a barbecue place in, Boston 10 years ago with one of my kids, a famous place. So I think it's now closed. And a friend of mine was running it, and they have cornbread, and I they come out in squares, and it was like cake. It
Mm,
was sweet, which was, like, awful, and it was extremely refined flour. I mean, it was highly
yeah.
milled corn, and I said to him, I said, "This is you should just call it corn cake, because if you serve this down the South, I think they'd run you out of town because it was"
Not necessarily. I think
Really?
that the South, well, we can't agree on a lot of things. Let's just throw that out there. But cornbread is definitely one of those things we don't agree about. And that was part of sort of this book was hilarious because I would go to someone in Arkansas and say, well, do you use yellow cornmeal or white, or do you like it sweet or savory? And I got a different answer everywhere. The only connecting states I can find is that I think Middle Tennessee and North Carolina have a lot they tend to like a white cornmeal that is savory,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you get out into Texas and Arkansas, and you're looking at sweet cornbread. Absolutely.
Really?
Yes.
You know, the more I do this, the more I realize I have no idea what I'm doing, 'cause I for 40 years, I've said, "Please don't in the South, you can't put sugar in your cornbread." You just explained to me that's not true. Of course, in iced tea, I'm sorry, but the amount of sugar in most iced tea in the South is pretty overwhelming, so
Yes.
that
But
I don't
we don't all drink sweet tea. And
good.
most places you go down here, there's a choice. You can it's sweet tea or not. I've only been in a couple of restaurants or diners where it's only sweet tea. Only.
Well, I was in Kansas City at the one of the barbecue places there years ago, and I was in a taxi and said to the driver, "Hey, I'll buy you lunch. Let's go." So we went, and you order behind the glass. The cashier sitting there. I forgot what I ordered, and I ordered an iced tea. I think it was 64 ounces. I mean, it was like, and it was so sweet. I mean, it must have had half a cup of sugar in it. I'm going
Yeah,
like,
probably did.
no, this isn't right. So
It's
anyway.
an acquired taste. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I can't be right about everything. So I
Mhm.
just got a question. First of all, for the person in my office, could we make the point size of the questions bigger? Because the screen's not right here. Thank you. And someone just asked whether there'd be a second edition or another follow-on version of this.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm working on it now. It's so fun. It's gonna be the cooking version. So, yes, I get to fried chicken and barbecue and bourbon and the vegetable garden,
Mm.
so many things, Jello salads, so many things.
Well, in Vermont,
Mhm.
Jello salad is definitely a thing. I mean,
Oh.
if you go to the church on a Friday night in our next town over in the summers, they have dinners and in Paulet, and you have pork, roast pork and some mashed potatoes. There's
Mhm.
always Jello salad,
Wow.
and the farmers I notice always go for that green or pink Jello salad.
Is it the green one that has the cottage cheese and other
Yeah,
things and the
yeah,
pineapple folded back
yeah,
in? Yeah.
the green one. Yeah, and
Yeah, we
so
get
it's
the one that's popular at this time of year down south is made with a cherry Jello. It's called
uh,
kind of a Bing cherry salad, but it's kind of dark and it will have fruit in it and often nuts, pecans, and it's to go with ham and turkey and things like that.
well, it's sort of like that pretzel salad thing, which
Yeah.
I had for the first time about 15 years ago, and I made fun of it when I heard the title, and then I had 3 portions of it, so it's actually really good. Um, so a question for you, is there a way to make
Yeah.
my hush puppies come out less dense?
Less dense. Well, it's the leavening in the batter then, right? So I would say make sure that if you're using like a self-rising flour or cornmeal in the batter, make sure it's not expired. Um, just use whatever your recipe is, whether it's soda or baking powder, just make sure it's in there. Also make sure your oil is hot enough, 350, 375 to fry them. You don't want them to spend a lot of time in the oil, and don't put a lot of hush puppies in at the same time when you're frying because you reduce the temperature of the oil. So it's those little nuances. I think with frying foods, that's important, but make sure there's leavening in there for sure.
I've noticed with frying that if you start at 370,
Mhm.
put in your french fries, whatever, the oil goes down to about 320 or something. It drops like 50 degrees, and you
Right?
end up actually frying around 325 or 330, not 370. So I
Mhm.
think people think that you need to keep the oil at 370. You don't. In fact, if you kept the oil at 370,
It would
I think
burn.
you'd end up
Mhm.
burning the food. So
Yeah.
you start high, it comes down, and then it sort of evens out.
Yeah, that is
So
really, really
you
great.
went to La Varenne.
I did.
Uh, I I knew the founder of that, but I did not go. What was that at the chateau where she
No, it was
lived,
in,
or this in Paris?
Rue de la not Université. Someone maybe in the chat will remember. It's in the 7th arrondissement,
Mhm,
very close to the Rodin, Museum
mhm.
and the Invalides. It
Unbelievable.
was wonderful. I loved it. I was young. I don't think I really appreciated everything there, but, it was just to be exposed, to live in an apartment in Paris and get up and go to cooking school and stand on your feet and go through, and you're worn out at the end of the day, but then there's this desire to see Paris, right? Get out to see Paris.
All the things we could have done back then, and
Mhm.
sometimes did, and you look back now and go, "How much would you give to take 9 months and go live in Paris and go to cooking
Oh,
school?" I would
absolutely.
give quite a lot to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I wished Anne Willen still had that school open in the 7th, and because I bet you're exactly right. There are a whole lot of people who would love that experience. It's yeah,
But
yeah.
she also had that great chateau, right?
She did. Yeah, I never went there. Yeah, never
That
went
sounds
there.
like, yeah, I'll spend 9 months in a chateau in the country. Sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
I like this story. You went to visit Julia. That was the time when Paul was in the nursing home, and I
Mhm.
remember that time. And you gifted her a ripe Georgia peach from my kitchen in Atlanta. That sounds like an Alice Waters moment for you, right?
I was just lucky because I was so the interview had come together so quickly, and I was leaving my house quickly, and then at the last minute before I locked the door, said, "Oh my gosh, I don't have a hostess gift. I don't have anything to bring Julia Child." And it's not like I wanted to run over to Lenox Square and buy something for her, and even if I did, I didn't have the time to do it. So I just looked on the counter, and it happened to be July, and there were ripe peaches, and I just grabbed one, wrapped it up in a kitchen towel, and put it in my purse. As it turned out, it was the best thing
Right.
I've ever brought her, and I think that it did teach me that, something that was from me to her and not in her area of the country, was just the most appropriate present for Julia Child. And yeah, she was going through a tough time then. Paul was in a nursing home. The house was very quiet. She greeted me at the front door herself, and she was as tall as the door frame.
You mean at the back door, right? The one right by the
Oh no, it was I came up the front walk
Oh,
in
I always
Cambridge. I
came
didn't. I know
back.
there's the side door where all
Right,
sorts of people drop things, and that was kind of going on because we were in the kitchen, and that side door, people were dropping.
right, it was right there. Yeah, right by the Garland stove.
Yeah, it was right by the Garland stove. Yeah. I went back recently and read the piece. That's the great thing about having a newspapers.com subscription is I can go back and read what I wrote 30 years ago. And I remember being in that kitchen. I was so nervous. But she was so gracious and going through a very lonely time in her life.
Yeah, she she invited me to come over and cook, and she was you're right, standing in the doorway, filling it entirely.
Yeah.
Now you made me feel bad because I didn't bring a hostess gift, but, um,
Well, she
she would
didn't expect it, so don't worry about that. She didn't
the,
expect it.
Paul was still fine early on, but
Mhm.
he was quite an artist in his own right, actually, with the paintings and stuff he did, and
Right, and the photography too.
yeah,
He was a lovely man. I met them both the first time when I was newly at the newspaper, and Natalie Dupree had invited me over to Rich's cooking school because Julia was there promoting one of her new books. It probably was 79 or 80, and, there was a luncheon, and photographer from the newspaper took my picture, and it's one of my favorite possessions. In fact, I think it's in the bank lockbox because it's a picture of Paul and Julia and me. And he just was very quiet.
very
And,
quiet, yeah,
yeah, and sort of unassuming.
right.
He was a listener,
Right.
very, and she was so grand. I mean, she really was. Yeah, loved her.
Yeah, there was no wallflower, in her makeup at all.
She was a basketball player, wasn't she, in high school?
Really? I didn't
Yeah, I
know.
believe so. When I interviewed her one time, she played basketball. I mean, she was a force, and she was the right person to do what she did, to bring French cooking to America. Because I think at the time, if she had been small and demure and a little shirtwaist dress, nobody would have given her the attention. She had a gusto to herself and a presence. And actually finishing the book about uh, Judith Jones, the editor,
Oh, yeah.
and just reading about Julia again. Yeah, she was.
Well, I think she always, I once asked her about, the fact that she was entertaining on camera
Mhm.
and, and that was part of her charm, and she was almost offended because she wanted to be known as a teacher. She didn't want to be
Mm,
known as a performer. She
right.
her love was teaching, and you could see that, like, if, Simone Simca had a recipe for chicken, she'd go to the local market, the Star Market, and pick out some garbage 3.5 pound chicken and try to make the French recipe. And then she would have to adapt it to the chicken we have here, which was not nearly as good as what Simca was using. So I think that translation, which I don't know today, probably, people might argue about, but she was really one of the first people to really translate another cuisine into American speak.
Yeah,
And
very
that was
so.
hugely useful. I think she also was she made it she was conversational and made you feel like, "Oh, she can do it, I can do it." She brought it down to an approachable level, right? I mean,
Definitely, but I think Judith Jones was such a big part of that book, and reading her part that she took with in working with Julia, it was just fascinating, and I loved the series that was on Julia because it took you back to the 1960s, in, Cambridge and that time period in America. So, that's the thing about food and writing. Oftentimes it's not just the recipes, really. It's the
right.
culture of the time and what was acceptable and what was not acceptable. And then I bring it to where, sort of where we are now. I mean, I'm with you. It's hard for me now to write, just to read food columns that are just about asparagus or just about peaches coming to season. I almost want a reason. I need to know how this is connecting me to my life today. That's kind of where, I don't know about you, where I am with food. But you've built such an empire. I have just my little I've
That,
just got my
you
little
you should come visit us here in Boston and look at the empire. It's not,
well, I'm impressed with your
it's not
organization.
Louis the 15th, I can assure you. It's not even Louis the First. So you said something interesting you said about chocolate cakes. You said, um, you were talking about what black belt meant,
Mhm.
and you said, today it might refer to a place with a majority black population, but in the early 19th century, it was all about the soil.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
talk about that.
Well, there was a black belt in Alabama, and I believe there was a black belt also in another 1 or 2 southern states, possibly Mississippi. Um because I just came across that recently, and I thought the black belt was unique to Alabama, and it is a distinct region of Alabama that they classify, but it was where the soil was good, and so there was a lot of farming there, and so there was a lot of cotton grown there, and so there were a lot of enslaved people that were in that area, and then after emancipation, there was a lot of sharecropping, and there was a lot of poverty, and there was a lot of misuse of the soil. Well, because a lot of those cash crops for the South, tobacco, cotton, they ripped the soil of any nutrients. And that's what George Washington Carver and others at Tuskegee tried to figure out. Okay, we don't have the wherewithal to just go live anywhere. We are left with this soil. What can we do with it? And that's where they started growing sweet
Hmm.
potatoes and peanuts that would give back to the soil. And that's where we learn about all, the nitrogen that, beans and peas give
Right.
back to us to a garden. Yeah. So that's a long answer to your question.
Well, my understanding was most Southerners in the 19th century might have had 10 or 20 acres, but they didn't have big farms. Like
Correct.
that
Yeah.
was rare. You grow some corn, you'd have a couple of pigs. It was
Hmm.
your diet was probably not great because of plogger, right? I mean, you had that corn diet didn't give you the vitamins you needed. It was not. It was pretty poor for a lot of people, right?
Very. The
Yeah.
South is very poor. The 1% were the plantation
Right.
owners. Right. Yeah. Very much.
So, so what's happening today? One of the things I'm interested in is how people actually cook today.
Hmm.
So if I just talked to someone in Rome I worked with a couple years ago and asked her to come up with a few recipes about, well, what do your friends cook for like Tuesday night?
Yeah.
And it was some of it was kind of familiar and some of it wasn't. So if I asked you that question about where you live,
Hmm.
how do people actually cook? Is it a mix of old and new? Is it all new? Are they cooking Thai food on Tuesday night? What are they doing?
It is that. It is all that. But cooking has changed, but it also depends on your demographics. Like, do you have kids in the house? What time does dinner have to get on the table? Are your kids grown? You're empty nest. You have more flexibility.
Right.
But I do think that bolder flavors, have definitely come into our cooking. Uh, I think that buying and growing local has never been more popular than it is today. And if you have the wherewithal to pay extra to support a local grower, you do. We have a lot of farmers markets down here. People are buying fresh, leaning in that direction as much as we can, and also giving back to the local community. It is one of the few things I think we can control if you have the luxury of being able to control what you eat.
Right.
It is a luxury because a lot of people just have to buy what's on sale, and with grocery prices never been higher, they just have to get the meals out and people fed. So I think as a newspaper reporter, as a mother, as someone who has researched the South, I tend to look at things differently. And when the cake mix doctor came out, and I got terrible criticism from scratch cooks about that book on how could I use a cake mix. What I said was, well, there are a lot of people where I come from that use a cake mix. And I still maintain that we can't all eat the same. We can't bake the same. And that's what makes it interesting. And even on my post yesterday on Substack, it was a cake mix recipe and a story behind it. But I also gave a link to a scratch version of a fabulous lemon cake and said, if you don't use a mix, here's where you can go. And it was interesting for me to see the difference in the numbers. And that's what Substack offers us. There's sort of these
Right.
analytics on how many clicks on this and how many clicks on that. And I would say just slightly more clicked on the cake mix recipe.
Well, one of my kids is a baker. She did it professionally for a while. She used to work at a little bakery in a town in Vermont, and, it turns out that bakery used cake mix
Oh,
for
no
all their all
surprise.
their cakes. That's what they started with, is like
Yeah.
boxed yellow cake mix in large sacks, but yeah,
Did they take out their own trash and
she
hide the
was
dumpster?
shocked. Yeah, that they,
Oh,
that was
it's
their
been
little
it's
s
been going on for years, I
yeah.
think. I know, and I can taste it too. I can taste a mix. Yeah.
You know what it tastes like to me? I can taste a mix a mile off.
Yeah.
It tastes or smells like wet cardboard.
Cornbread.
That's
That's
exactly what
interesting.
it's wet
Yeah.
cardboard taste. It has that funny thing. I mean,
Huh.
the texture's great. I don't mind the texture. It's just got that
Yeah.
funny thing going on.
That's so funny. Yeah. Well, and they're all different. Like the yellow, Pillsbury yellow, which really tastes heavy of coconut. It's got a lot of yellow food coloring. So it's not my favorite.
Well, in a lot of cultures, when I was in Mexico recently, they have that yellow dye powder, right? For
Right.
a lot of their baked goods, and so I actually have a bottle of the yellow, so
Oh
I
my
can.
gosh. But
Well, I don't use it that often, but, it's if you wanna
yeah.
make it look like they do they did a couple of, they do a biscuit recipe I did, which uses yeast and baking powder, and,
Okay.
they color it. It has this really deep yellow color. I wonder how do they get that's a lot of yolks, and turns out it was
Oh.
you had the powder. So I made your cantaloupe cream pie
Oh, you did?
last summer, yeah, and everyone
Wow.
was like everyone kinda looked at me, and I said, "No, I really wanna try this," and I it's a great way, as I think you pointed out, to use up or people used up super ripe, overripe cantaloupe.
Yeah.
It's a custard pie. It's actually quite good. You wanna talk about that recipe?
Sure. It's a railroad recipe. Yeah. So funny you picked that one, but good for you. Yeah. It's an outlier in the book for sure. Yeah. I read the story about the railroad chef who from Texas, from Fort Worth, I believe that area originally. And he, had to use up what was available, what was given to him. And you couldn't, because the railroad system early in the South, you would, if he was going through Arkansas and melons were in season, they'd load in, cases of melons that he would need to use up before they got to the next stop, where watermelons might come in, or strawberries, or peaches, or whatever. So they were always looking at using and then getting rid of, and they had all of these ripe melons. And how can you use ripe melons? Well,
Right,
maybe you can turn them into something. But the problem with cantaloupe is that they're so watery and so that was a challenge on that recipe. That was an example of a fabulous story that I wanted in the book because it spoke to economy and railroads and a rural South, but also how do I make this work for people like Chris Kimball? I didn't know that you were going to be making it. So you have to get the juice. We actually cut the melon into cubes, put it in a food processor,
right.
pureed it, and then you cook it down a little bit, the juices to concentrate that. And then, like you said, make a custard. That is the liquid for the custard. Yeah.
Yeah, custard pie just seems to be like one of those generic formulaic things you can make a million versions of, right? Pumpkin pie is a custard pie, so, I do like custard pie. So let's talk
I
about
love.
Lane cake. So Lane cake was in, To Kill a Mockingbird, as you well know,
Yep.
and it has what did she say? A little shinny in it? It's referred to
Little
as
shinny, Shinny. Yeah.
right, little
Shinny, which was
apple.
us, colloquialism for moonshine, which
Yeah.
i.e. whiskey. Yeah.
I
But
had
there yeah.
one of my employees lived years ago in Kentucky, and she
Mhm.
brought me the Christmas gift moonshine. And,
Oh,
I gotta tell you, I thought it was gonna be like rubbing alcohol. It was actually really good.
so
I mean, it was
that was
smooth.
craft moonshine then, huh?
It's really smooth. I was really surprised. It's delicious. So, sticky what's sticky lemon cake?
Sticky lemon cake, that's another cake. So those cakes, what you mentioned, the Lane cake, sticky lemon cake, those are cakes that are from the cake belt of the South, kind of near Columbus, Georgia, Americus, Georgia, and then over into Arkansas. I mean, Arkansas, Alabama. Yeah, so sticky lemon cake is essentially a curd, a lemon curd that goes between layers of like a one, two, three, four cake,
Mhm.
and usually has like a fluffy white icing. People call that 7 minute icing, seven
Oh,
minute
yeah.
frosting, those kind of things. So that is the idea. And when you cut into it, it's sticky in between, and that's how it got its name. But it goes by another name for it. It's called a lemon cheesecake. So if
Hmm.
you are from that area, which I call the cake belt, the Southern cake belt. You might know it as lemon cheesecake. And I've flipped through so many of those like neighborhood cookbooks that we talked about, and they um, are filled with not just one, but two, but three, but four, but five lemon cheesecakes. That's another advantage for researchers looking through old cookbooks. When you see 7 or 8
Right.
examples, it's a thing. Yeah.
So, why do you think the South was so big on cakes, layer cakes,
Hmm.
which, by the way, I think beats most French pastries, hands down. Uh, I mean, I like tarts, but layer cakes are great. But the North, like New England, for example, layer cakes, it was mostly pies and other things.
Right.
We didn't have a lot of layer cakes. Why so many layer cakes in the South? Why was that such a big thing?
Occasions, the church, prestige.
Hmm. Because people were trying to outdo each other with their cakes.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. But, you're not gonna make a layer cake unless you've got, an occasion, a reason to make it, some people to share it with, and so layer cakes. Also, it was after baking powder was widely available
right,
and cake flour kinda came onto the scene.
right.
So they could really, perfect the spongier layers, softer layers, and figured out a way in the South with humidity and hot weather for the cake to sort of stay in place. But I really think it was
Say that last part again. That was interesting. Say that
oh,
again.
yeah, so they could figure out ways for it to stay in place, such as the sticky lemon cake. You don't have a frosting in between those layers, you've got like a curd. It's almost
I
like an adhesive, it's like an adhesive,
Oh,
right? And then
that's
if you were
interesting.
to frost that with like a caramel frosting, which would be fabulous flavor, by the way, with the
Yeah.
lemon and the caramel. That cake's not going anywhere. I mean, it's like hairspray. That caramel, caramel icing's like hairspray. I mean, your hair is not doing anything with heat, humidity, and so that became it.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it became and also
Huh.
economy because women in the South would bake these types of cakes, and sell them. So it
Uh,
became a cottage industry as well. Uh, and that has always been important. People have never been picky about buying food from other women, uh, to support them in the South. They don't care. I mean, I know there's a lot of rules and there's a cottage industry and all that, but my mother bought rolls from her friend Ella out the back door. So, and peach cobbler has been sold in beauty parlors across the South.
really?
Yeah. So
Yeah, I've
it,
heard stories of, like, when at train stops in the South, people would sell fried chicken or whatever, and
well,
I
yeah,
think in one
the
case,
eggs, yeah.
it was so successful that the town fathers, the white town fathers, wanted to get on the action, so they made people buy expensive licenses and, there was a
That
lot of
doesn't surprise me. And it
yeah,
was
it's a lot of
probably during the Great Migration, Jim Crow South too,
problem.
where African Americans could not sit in the same train car and they also could not order food. They didn't know where they would stay along the route and they only stayed with family. So they had to pack food like
Right.
fried chicken and take it with them. Yeah.
Um, so what are angel biscuits specifically? Like, there's a million different kinds of baking powder.
Right.
what are
Angel biscuits are a light biscuit that have both yeast and baking powder in them, and maybe some baking soda. So super light, but they've got the bit of yeast in it. And what that does, it kind of makes them more like a roll, and then they keep better. So I think it's a great biscuit to make. Like if you need to make biscuits for an event and you say you're going to put ham in them or smoked
Mhm.
turkey or whatever, make the angel biscuits because they keep better, whereas biscuits tend to dry out, which is why these ladies made biscuits morning, noon, and night, because biscuits are always
Yeah,
best
they
for
don't.
the bear.
I make them Saturday morning, and by Sunday, they're not very good.
Yeah.
No, I found the yeast and baking powder in the bisquetes in Mexico City,
Hmm.
but I wasn't that familiar with using yeast and baking powder. So I let them sit for like half an hour or something. I didn't let them sit for like 2 hours. It wasn't a full rise. Is that
Right.
how they use the yeast in those biscuits too? They didn't it
Yes.
wasn't. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, you can the rise it does yeah, you just gotta give them a little rise. It doesn't matter when you do it. You can do it like the whole batch of dough, give it a rise, punch it down, cut out the biscuits,
right,
bake them,
right.
or you can make the dough, roll it out, cut them out, put them on the pan, and
Let them
let
rise.
them rise. Yeah. I've seen both recipes, and both work just fine. Yeah. So but they're a nice change. They're a little softer. We've got some country ham producers in this area, and that's the kind of biscuit they will bake off, fill with shaved country ham, and sell just a little box of them for, I don't know, a lot of money. Yeah.
So, what do you think about Maryland beaten biscuits? You think
Well,
those are a horrible idea?
I was not raised on them. We like soft and squishy,
Yeah.
and so they're not my favorite, but I like their story. And
What is the story behind them?
well, because that is how people would. I was looking for something, and actually, I need to. In just a second, I think I've got to plug a charger in my iPad. So I'll do that too. But people would take like a mallet or a. Some people took a shotgun and would just hit the dough, and it would aerate it. It would create bubbles in the dough. This was before yeast, before, were used
Hmm.
in biscuit making. And that's how people made the dough lighter. So it was
So,
just a
okay,
way of
so
leavening the dough.
yeah, when I had them, I was
I'm listening.
at an event in Maryland. Actually, one of my relatives died. I have a lot of relatives in Baltimore, and they had beaten biscuits, but I'll wait till you come back.
Yes, I'm here, right
You're
here.
still listening.
Sorry,
Um,
this is Anne's first Substack live. So of course what she thought was the device was charged was not all the way
at
charged.
least you
Okay,
get a view of your book. There you go.
what's that? There we go. I'm coming back. Does that work?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're a little tilted, but so I thought beaten biscuits, I didn't think they were lighter. I thought they just had lots of layers in them.
Beaten biscuits, they do have layers because of the leavening.
Right.
How does that look, Chris? Is that all right?
Um, yeah, it looks like you're a little bit at sea because it's moving, but once it stops, that's it. You got
Is
it.
that good? Okay.
Yeah. So I just wanted to go through, as I said earlier, I have, by the way, if you want to post comments in the chat, refresh your page. I think that, so here are all my recipes that I've,
I love it. I love it.
let's see, there's cornbread. Okay, spoon bread. I grew up actually, believe it or not, eating spoon bread. Um, just want to talk about spoon bread. There's a million varieties. What do you consider to be the best or the one you like the
Well,
best?
spoon bread should have eggs separated, and then you beat the whites and fold them back into the mixture. So
Right.
that is spoon bread.
So it's like a souffle.
It is a souffle, and people used to call it batter bread. Yeah.
Oh, really? That's the same thing?
Uh-huh. Well, it was a name for it in Virginia. Yeah, but spoon bread is very much what I consider an Upper South recipe. Virginia, Maryland, parts of Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky, Tennessee. Yeah, that's spoon bread country.
So what about you have buckwheat pancakes, which I love to make, blueberry
Mhm.
buckwheat pancakes. Was buckwheat one of those flours that are common throughout the South, and would they mix it with all-purpose or cake flour? How would they use?
No mixing. It would have been grown where wheat was very hard to grow in the South.
Right.
And buckwheat would have grown in areas that were cooler. So you're looking at parts of Kentucky, Virginia, those areas. Edna Lewis in her cookbooks has written about buckwheat in recipes, and they would have been able to grow that in the Piedmont of Virginia. I think it's such an interesting ingredient. Wheat was very much a privileged crop.
Hmm.
You really you, biscuits were for Sunday in the old South. So you would
Hmm.
not everybody would have had it, but they would have had corn and they would have had buckwheat if they grew it. It was
Now, what
also a good
about milk? What I know that in the South, you use a lot of condensed milk or sweetened condensed milk, or evaporated milk.
right.
Were cows in that kind of climate wouldn't produce a lot of milk? The milk went off and potentially was dangerous,
No,
or there was not a lot of dairy farming in the South?
no, there was definitely dairy farming. I think the South, you have to look at the South as being almost in a country in itself, right? And there's all kinds of climates, there's all kinds of terrain. Middle Georgia was the dairy capital of Georgia in the South.
Hmm.
The problem in there in Eatonton, Georgia, which was the dairy capital, is that they didn't have the railroads to get the milk out. So they
No.
could never get it to the rest. So milk was an ingredient that was used locally. We didn't have big cities, we didn't have bakeries, but we had a lot of farming. So you would have had milk for baking if you had a cow or if you lived in a town with a grocery. That's why some of those classic recipes like Smith Island cake, German chocolate cake call for a canned milk. And canned milk is in a lot of recipes. And you see it called out in recipes, even like squash casseroles will
Right.
call for a cup of evaporated milk.
Or they call for sour milk, which showed up in a lot of
True,
these.
true, which was also a staple, and I think it, along with baking soda, became the leavener of the South. It leavened cakes, biscuits, yeah, I think one of my favorite cakes is just a chocolate cake and another one is a zucchini cake that are leavened with baking soda. They make denser cakes, which are quite
Now,
nice.
wait a minute. Out of this whole book, which, as I said,
Mhm.
is one of my favorite books, you're gonna tell me zucchini cake is one of your favorite cakes in this
Sorry,
book?
and I didn't put it in there, and the reason is because I have an August birthday.
Uh,
That's what yeah, so it has been
Zucchini
baked
cake. Is
for
this
me,
like carrot cake, essentially?
and I didn't put carrot cake in the book, although it's going in the next one because I have a great state fair winning carrot cake from the state of Texas. It's going in the next book, yeah.
So,
Fabulous.
does, does the baking of, let's say, New England and the baking of different parts of the South, I understand they're very
Mhm.
different regions, are they still few and far between? There's not much crossover to this day? Or what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, you tell me. I think we both enjoy blueberries. I think we both in New England and the South are similar in that probably celebrate what's in season, right? What is grown. When blueberries come in season, you eat blueberries. You don't maybe have some of the fish that we have from the Gulf. I mean, that's not baking, but that's definitely a part of the next book. But you have your shorelines in New England, and you've got your fruit, and you've got people who have been in rural locations, and you've got people who've made their own bread. So, in some respects, you might say that New England and the South do have similarities. I think you certainly have had different and yet the same attitude toward race relations. I mean, there are some interesting cultural differences and samenesses. The Moravians that settled in North Carolina, well, they came in through Pennsylvania. I know that maybe not
Well,
New England.
there's a Moravian cemetery in the next town.
There you go. Right. So I think in that all originally were German flavors. And and so yeah, we are in some ways same, but we worked with different ingredients that were available locally. And
One thing I noticed, when I was on a farm in the summers in Vermont was the cook, Marie Briggs,
mhm,
classic Vermont, with those heels with the big, thick black shoes and heels and, uh, was baking all the time. They probably had 30 recipes or 40 maybe. I
mhm.
mean, and they would cook pretty much the same things, Anadama bread, white bread, whole wheat bread, molasses cookies, few
Yeah.
pies, baking powder biscuits, whatever. They weren't interested in a lot of change. they cooked what they cooked, and so people say, "Well, I wanna cook without a recipe." I said, "Well, yeah, but these people cooked those 30 or 40 recipes all their life. That's why they didn't need a recipe." It wasn't
True.
like she wasn't cooking, tacos on Tuesday night and, some sort of Vietnamese, chicken salad on Wednesday night. They were quite happy to cook what they knew. Is that, I assume, similar in the South? It's such a
Very, very similar. I
right,
don't think we didn't have a lot of repetition in our meals
right,
in my house probably until the 1970s when my mother had access to zucchini and olive oil and things like
mm,
that. I think it's very true. That's why believe on holidays down south, and maybe it's true where you are, that people tend to repeat some of the older recipes
right.
that you don't get to have Monday through Friday, right? And I know, the potato salad that your mother made, or the squash casserole, or the jello salad, the coconut cake, or whatever. There's an older family recipe always is there, and it helps you remember, you're growing up. It's very nostalgic. It's nice.
Yeah, I don't remember too many of my mother's recipes, but that's a whole 'nother issue.
Okay, well, that's a whole nother Substack.
Yeah, I remember Marie Briggs recipes, I remember. Give me a couple of recipes, we talked about some of them, but from your book,
Yeah.
uh, that would be surprising, people never heard of before, it might be something different for people.
Wow. Oh gosh. Definitely the cantaloupe pie. Well, I have some information. I have a page in here called arrowroot biscuits. Florida is such a fascinating state, and wheat could not grow in Florida, but something called arrowroot or a derivative of it did. Um, so I think that's something you probably don't know anything about. Alwindal, which is also very low country, that's a Glenn Roberts recipe. So
What
that
is
had
it called?
Awindal,
What is
Awindal,
that?
and it's named after the indigenous people. It is sort of like it's a grits cornmeal combination.
Hmm.
It's yummy and fascinating, and it's baked, and so that not many people have heard of. Um, Sweet potato bread, maybe you've heard of that. Uh, Kolaches from Texas. I had never baked them, but love them. They're like a big old Texas yeast roll with jam. Peppermint chiffon pie. That is a Flannery O'Connor recipe. What else are different? Sonkers, the Sonkers from North Carolina.
Oh, the soccer, yeah.
Yeah, super juicy cobblers.
So
That
those are cobblers with dumplings, I think, aren't they, or something?
No, they don't have dumplings, they just are super juicy. So you've
Oh,
just got a lot of juice, and then they make what's called a dip. It's like here I am as a better. Um, they make a dip, and it's like a custard sauce to go on top.
hmm.
Um,
So what do you, out of that book or out of your personal history, what are a couple of family recipes you still make?
oh gosh, well, I have 3 family recipes in here. My mother's banana bread, my grandmother's spoon bread, and my mother and other grandmothers what's called chess cake.
Oh, yeah.
And it's lovely. Yeah, it's like a
Is that like
blondie.
just pie, or is it totally different?
Well, no, it's like a blondie, and yet it's better. It's all brown sugar, finely chopped toasted pecans, really, really lovely. But yeah, I think it was named because had the kind of gooey consistency of chess pie. Yeah.
Is chess pie, since it's such a classic of the South, is that something people still make, or is that kind of gone the way of history?
I think you find it, but a lot of what you find, I wouldn't consider a true chess pie. I think a chess pie needs to just have your basics, your eggs, your butter, your sugar, um, but it differs regionally. So the chess pie that I grew up with in Tennessee had vinegar and cornmeal in it.
Hmm.
So yeah. So it's going to be, it always has a bite to it. And very similar to the vinegar pies that
So
are,
it has doesn't chess pie have a little vinegar in it, or
not
no?
all of them do.
No?
No, they don't. They were chess pie in Middle Tennessee is vinegar, and then if you go up into Appalachia, you're gonna find vinegar pies, which is, not called a chess pie, it's just called a vinegar pie, and apple cider vinegar is what you use in both, and that was always a substitute for lemon juice. So they
Hmm.
were sort of the hardscrabble Southern, substitutions for lemon pie. Yeah, it was a lemon pie.
I guess you know something about the baking of the South, huh?
I certainly have learned it. I think that I didn't know as anything really. I knew my region, but it is fascinating. And I think it's taught me is that, you know, there's just beauty everywhere, really. There's interesting recipes everywhere, and we're never too old to learn. Right?
And it's been a real pleasure. I love your book.
Oh, thank you, Chris.
I'm going to have to try that combination of grits and cornmeal and see what that's.
Daw. Yeah.
Oh, and okay.
Yeah.
Great. Take care. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Thanks for
Bye.
this. Bye.